Your little candle shop isn't going to save you, Olivia. My father's voice boomed across the mahogany conference table, making the crystal water glasses tremble. While you've been playing shopkeeper, Marcus has been learning to run a real business. Our business. I sat there in my simple black blazer, watching my brother's smug smile grow wider as our father continued his speech about legacy and responsibility. The Anderson Group's quarterly board meeting had turned into another opportunity to remind everyone why Marcus was the golden child and I was the disappointment. My name is Olivia Anderson, and at 32, I'd spent the last 5 years building Haven and Light, my artisanal candle company, while my family built their luxury hotel empire. To them, my business was a cute hobby, something to keep me occupied while Marcus, my younger brother, learned the intricacies of running their $15 million hospitality group. The Anderson Group needs strong leadership, my father continued, straightening his Rolex. That's why today, I'm officially announcing Marcus as my successor and CEO of our entire operation. The board members nodded approvingly. Of course they did. They'd watched Marcus grow up, seen him graduate from business school, and observed him taking on more responsibilities. What they didn't see was how he cut corners, manipulated numbers, and charmed his way through every crisis. My mother touched my arm gently, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Darling, don't look so glum. This is for the best. You have your creative outlet. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world. I wanted to tell her about Haven and Light's growth projections, our expanding product lines, and the major retailers courting us for exclusive collections. But I'd learned long ago that in this room, my achievements might as well be written in invisible ink. Marcus leaned back in his chair, adjusting his custom-made suit. Don't worry, sis. Maybe we can stock your candles in our hotel gift shops, as a family favor. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. What my family didn't know was that while they were dismissing my little shop, I'd been building something extraordinary, something that would prove more resilient than their empire of marble lobbies and champagne brunches. Later that evening, as I closed up my flagship store in downtown Portland, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The space that my parents had called charmingly modest had just been featured in Luxury Lifestyle magazine as one of the most innovative retail concepts in the Pacific Northwest. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and business partner, Sarah. Just got the numbers from the West Coast buyers. You're going to want to see this. I locked up and headed to my office above the shop, where the scent of my latest creation, a complex blend of cedar, sage, and sea salt, filled the air. The space was everything my parents' corporate headquarters wasn't. Warm, inviting, alive with creativity. Vintage wooden shelves lined the walls, displaying our hand-poured candles alongside the stories of their creation. Each product had its own tale, its own purpose. Sarah was waiting at my desk, practically bouncing with excitement. Nordstrom wants to triple their order for the holiday season. And that's not even the best part. I sat down, taking in the spreadsheets on her laptop. The numbers were staggering. Our sustainable practices and unique marketing approach had caught the attention of major retailers across the country. We weren't just selling candles. We were selling an experience, a moment of peace in a chaotic world. We're projecting 8-figure revenue by next quarter, Sarah said, her eyes shining. Olivia, do you know what this means? I did. It meant that while my family was focused on their traditional luxury market, we tapped into something bigger. The growing demand for authentic, sustainable luxury. Our customers didn't just buy our products. They bought our story, our values, our vision. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, Dad wants to know if you're coming to the family dinner tonight. He's announcing some big expansion plans. I thought about declining, but curiosity got the better of me. 2 hours later, I found myself sitting at my parents' massive dining table, picking at my mother's chef's latest creation while Marcus held court. The Anderson Group is expanding to Asia, he announced grandly. We're leveraging everything to build 3 new properties in Singapore, Bangkok, and Tokyo. It's going to revolutionize our brand. My father beamed with pride, but something in Marcus's voice set off alarm bells. I'd spent enough time in business to recognize the slight tremor of uncertainty beneath the bravado. Leveraging everything. I asked carefully, that sounds risky in the current market. Marcus waved off my concern. This is why you stick to candles, sis. You don't understand the big picture. Sometimes you have to take big risks for big rewards. My mother nodded sagely. Your brother knows what he's doing, Olivia. The Anderson Group has always been about bold moves. I wanted to point out that bold moves weren't the same as reckless ones, but I held my tongue. Instead, I excused myself early, citing inventory duties at the shop. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, I called James Turner, an old college friend who now worked in international finance. "Can you look into something for me?" I asked. "The Anderson Group's Asian expansion. Something feels off." A week later, James's findings confirmed my worst fears. The company was over-leveraged, taking massive loans against their existing properties to fund the expansion. One market downturn, one project delay, and the whole house of cards could collapse. I debated warning my father, but past experience had taught me he wouldn't listen. To him, I was still the daughter who'd chosen to play with candles instead of joining the family business. So I focused on my own company, continuing to build Haven and Light with the same careful attention to detail that had gotten us this far. Each new product launch was meticulously planned, each expansion calculated and sustainable. 3 months later, the first cracks in the Anderson Group's facade began to show. Construction delays in Singapore made the news. Cost overruns in Bangkok raised eyebrows in the industry. Marcus's confident smile started to look strained around the edges. One evening, as I was experimenting with new scent combinations in my workshop, my father showed up unannounced. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his usual commanding presence diminished. "The banks are getting nervous," he said without preamble. "They're talking about calling in some loans." I set down the essential oils I'd been blending. "How bad is it?" He sank into one of my comfortable workshop chairs, looking out of place in his expensive suit. Marcus assured me he had it under control. Said he had contingency plans. "But now you're not so sure." I finished for him. He picked up one of my candles, turning it over in his hands. The label read Resilience, a blend I created during my first year in business, when everyone had told me I was making a mistake. "I never understood this," he said softly. "Why you chose this over what we built. The Anderson Group was supposed to be your legacy too." I took the candle from him, running my fingers over the hand-printed label. "Dad, I didn't reject our legacy. I just chose to build something of my own, something that reflected my values." He looked around my workshop, really seeing it for the first time. "How?" He hesitated. "How is your business doing? Really?" I pulled out my laptop and showed him our numbers. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the projections, the purchase orders, the growth metrics. He trailed off, shaking his head. "What you never expected from your daughter who wastes time with candles." I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. He had the grace to look ashamed. As he rushed out to deal with Marcus's latest crisis, I turned back to my workbench. The scent of success, it turned out, was subtler than my family had ever imagined. But this was just the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at Haven and Light earlier than usual, needing the quiet hours before opening to center myself. The headlines were already circulating through the business community. Anderson Group faces investor exodus. Luxury hotel empire on shaky ground. Sarah burst through the door just as I was arranging our newest collection in the front window. "Have you seen this?" She thrust her tablet at me, displaying the Wall Street Journal's latest article. "Your brother's expansion plan is falling apart faster than anyone expected." I scanned the article, my stomach tightening at phrases like potential fraud and misrepresented financials. The Bangkok investors weren't just pulling out, they were considering legal action. "There's more," Sarah said, scrolling down. "The Singapore property's construction has been halted due to permit irregularities." "And Tokyo," she shook her head. "The land they were planning to build on might have environmental issues that Marcus overlooked during assessment." My phone had been buzzing all morning with messages from family members. Aunt Patricia wanted to know if I'd spoken to Marcus. Uncle James was concerned about the family's reputation. My mother had left 3 voicemails, each more desperate than the last. I ignored them all, focusing instead on our morning staff meeting. While my family's empire teetered, I had 20 employees counting on me to lead. We had our own expansion plans to discuss, contracts to review, and a new holiday collection to finalize. "The Nordstrom buyer will be here at 2, I reminded my team. "Let's make sure everything is perfect." As my staff dispersed to their tasks, Sarah lingered behind. "Are you really not going to get involved in the Anderson Group situation?" I picked up one of our best-selling candles. "Clarity, a blend of lavender, mint, and sea air that I created during my first year of independence. They made their choice years ago, Sarah. They chose Marcus's flash over substance. They're reaping what they sowed. The meeting with the Nordstrom buyer went brilliantly. Our holiday collection, inspired by vintage family gatherings but reimagined for modern sensibilities, struck exactly the right note. As we were wrapping up, my father appeared in the shop doorway, looking as disheveled as I'd ever seen him. "Olivia, we need to talk." I excused myself from the buyer and led my father upstairs to my office. He paced the room, taking in the warm lighting, the carefully curated mood boards, the wall of customer testimonials. "The banks are calling in their loans," he said finally. Marcus, he wasn't just aggressive with the expansion. He was reckless. He falsified reports, inflated projections, borrowed against assets we didn't fully own. I sat down at my desk, letting the familiar scent of our signature blend, homecoming, calm my racing thoughts. "How bad is it?" "We could lose everything," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Not just the new properties. All of it. The entire Anderson Group." Part of me wanted to say "I told you so," but the defeat in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I asked, "Where's Marcus?" "Nobody knows. He's not answering his phone. His wife says he left last night and hasn't come home." Of course. Marcus had always been good at disappearing when things got tough, leaving others to clean up his messes. I'd watched him do it throughout our childhood, but this time the stakes were catastrophically higher. "What do you need from me?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your help," he said simply. "You've built something here that works, something real. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. They want answers, solutions. I need you there." I looked around my office at the empire I'd built while they weren't watching. Every candle, every scent, every carefully crafted story represented hours of work, meticulous attention to detail, and a dedication to sustainable growth over quick profits. "I'll be there," I said finally, "but not for Marcus. For you and for the employees who depend on the Anderson Group for their livelihoods." That night, I stayed late at the shop, reviewing the Anderson Group's financials that my father had shared. The more I dug, the worse it looked. Marcus hadn't just been aggressive. He'd been playing a dangerous game of financial chess with other people's pieces. Around midnight, my mother showed up, still elegant despite the obvious strain. "I brought you dinner," she said, setting down a container from my favorite Thai place. "I remember you used to work late a lot when you first started here." I looked up, surprised. It was the first time she ever acknowledged those early days when I'd worked 18-hour shifts, learning every aspect of my business from the ground up. "Thanks, Mom." She wandered around my office, stopping at the wall of press clippings I'd accumulated. Her fingers traced the Forbes article that had named Haven and Light one of the fastest-growing sustainable luxury brands in the country. "I never read any of these," she admitted. "I was so convinced you were just hiding here, running from real responsibility." She turned to face me, her eyes wet. "I was wrong, wasn't I?" I stood up and walked over to her, pointing to a photo of our first store opening. "See that candle in the window? That was our first bestseller. Redemption. A blend of storm-washed woods, fresh rain, and new growth. I created it the day after you and Dad told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life." She flinched at the memory. "And now look at you. While we were so focused on Marcus's big plans, you were building something beautiful." The next morning, I arrived at the Anderson Group's headquarters early. The board members were already gathering, their faces grim. My father sat at the head of the table, looking years older than he had just days ago. Marcus's chair was conspicuously empty. As the meeting began, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The Asian expansion had been built on a foundation of lies. Marcus had not only falsified projections, but had also hidden mounting debts and operational issues at our existing properties. "The brand is toxic right now," one board member stated bluntly. "No one will lend to us. Our stock is in freefall. We need a miracle." I listened quietly, taking notes and analyzing options. Finally, I cleared my throat. "I may have a solution." All eyes turned to me, some curious, some skeptical, some desperate for any hope. "Haven and Light has strong relationships with several ethical investment groups," I began. "Groups that value sustainable business practices and transparent operations. They might be interested in a restructured Anderson Group, one that aligns with modern values while maintaining its luxury appeal." I laid out my proposal, a complete overhaul of the company's approach, focusing on sustainable luxury, authentic experiences, and responsible growth. The very principles they'd mocked when I tried to introduce them years ago. It would mean scaling back the expansion. I continued, focusing on quality over quantity, rebuilding trust with both investors and customers. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy, but it's possible. And these investors, my father asked, they'd work with us, even with our current situation? They'll work with me, I corrected gently. They know Haven and Light's track record. They trust our approach. The boardroom erupted in discussion. Some members resisted the change. Others saw it as their only viable option. Finally, my father raised his hand for silence. I think we need to seriously consider Olivia's proposal. She's proven herself more capable than. He paused, glancing at Marcus's empty chair, and some of us realized. As the meeting adjourned, my father turned to me. I'd like to see it, he said. Your whole operation. Help me understand what we've been too blind to see. I stood up, offering him my hand. Come on, Dad. I'll show you how a real empire is built. The transformation of the Anderson Group began at dawn the next day. I arrived at headquarters to find my father already there, surrounded by stacks of documents and financial reports. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been there all night. Marcus finally called, he said without looking up. From somewhere in the Bahamas. Says he's taking some time to process things. I wasn't surprised. My brother had always believed in the fake it till you make it philosophy. Now that the faking had been exposed, he'd run away rather than face the consequences. The investors are coming at 10, I reminded him gently. We need to be prepared. The ethical investment group I contacted, Summit Partners, had agreed to an emergency meeting. They were intrigued by the possibility of transforming a traditional luxury hotel chain into a sustainable hospitality leader. Sarah met me in the conference room, armed with Haven and Light's success metrics and transformation strategy. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Saving the family business wasn't exactly in our 5-year plan. Before I could answer, the Summit Partners team arrived. Leading them was Victoria Chen, a sharp-eyed woman known for turning troubled companies into industry innovators. Ms. Anderson, she said, shaking my hand. I must admit, when you first called about the Anderson Group, I was skeptical. But your track record with Haven and Light is impressive. For the next 3 hours, we laid out our vision, not just financial restructuring, but a complete reimagining of what luxury hospitality could be. Sustainable practices, authentic local connections, and transparent operations would replace the old model of excess and exclusivity. The market is changing, I explained, pulling up Haven and Light's customer analysis. Modern luxury consumers want more than just high thread counts and champagne brunches. They want to feel good about where they spend their money. Victoria studied our projections carefully. You're proposing to decrease the number of properties but increase per location revenue through enhanced experiences and sustainable practices. Exactly, I nodded. Quality over quantity, the same principle that built Haven and Light. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. My daughter has shown us a different way of doing business, one we should have seen years ago. Victoria's team huddled together, discussing in low voices. Finally, she turned back to us. We're interested, but we have conditions. First, complete transparency about the current financial situation. Second, we want Olivia to lead the transformation. I felt my father stiffen beside me. Despite everything, the idea of officially handing control to his rebellious daughter was clearly difficult. Dad, I said softly, this isn't about taking over. It's about saving what you built. Let me help. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. She's in charge, he told Victoria. Whatever it takes. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. During the day, I worked with the transition team at Anderson Group, implementing new systems and reviewing every aspect of operations. At night, I returned to Haven and Light, ensuring my own company didn't suffer during this crucial time. The changes at Anderson Group were dramatic. We closed the failing properties and reinvested in our strongest locations. Each hotel was redesigned to emphasize local culture and sustainable luxury. Staff members were retrained in our new service philosophy. One evening, as I was reviewing renovation plans in my father's old office, my mother appeared with dinner. You're working too hard, she said, setting down the containers. Just like your father used to. I looked up, surprised by the comparison. Someone has to clean up Marcus's mess. She sat down, smoothing her designer dress. I always thought Marcus had your father's business sense. But watching you these past weeks, you have his real strength, the ability to build something lasting. I learned that from my candle shop, I said with a small smile. Every product had to be perfect, every customer interaction meaningful. No cutting corners. She picked up one of the new hotel brochures I've been designing. The cover showed a stunning eco-luxury suite, all natural materials and breathtaking views. This is beautiful, Olivia, so different from what we used to do, but better. That's the point, Mom. Luxury doesn't have to mean waste. Success doesn't have to come at the expense of ethics. Just then, my phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus, his first contact since disappearing to the Bahamas. Heard you're dismantling everything I built. Hope you're happy playing savior. I showed the message to my mother, watching her face fall. He still doesn't understand, does he? No, I replied, he never will. Marcus wanted the glory of success without the work of building it properly. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some longtime employees resisted the changes. Certain board members questioned our new direction. But as the first quarter under new management came to a close, the results spoke for themselves. Bookings at our redesigned properties were up 40%. Customer satisfaction scores had never been higher. Even our harshest critics had to admit that the new Anderson Group was becoming something special. One morning, I arrived at headquarters to find my father in the lobby, studying our new living wall installation, a vertical garden that helped purify the air naturally. Remember when you first suggested something like this? He asked. 5 years ago? I did remember. It was one of my last attempts to introduce sustainable practices before leaving to start Haven and Light. Marcus had called it hippie nonsense. Things changed, Dad. He turned to face me, his expression serious. You've done more than save the company, Olivia. You've given it a future. A real one. Before I could respond, Victoria Chen walked in, looking pleased. The numbers are in, she announced. The Anderson Group's transformation is being hailed as a model for sustainable luxury. Several other hotel chains are asking about our consulting services. My father beamed with pride, not his old pride in flash and appearance, but a deeper satisfaction in seeing something worthwhile being built. Later that day, as I sat in what was now my office, Sarah brought in a special delivery, a prototype of our newest Haven and Light collection, inspired by the Anderson Group's transformation. Phoenix Rising, she read from the label, a blend of rare woods, morning sunlight, and new growth. Limited edition. I picked up one of the candles, admiring how the sustainable packaging caught the light. We'd come so far from our first small batches in my apartment kitchen. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus, longer this time. Dad says you're some kind of corporate savior now. Funny how you couldn't handle real business 5 years ago, but now you're supposedly fixing mine. Don't expect a thank you. I showed the message to Sarah, who rolled her eyes. He still doesn't get it, does he? This was never about fixing his mistakes. It was about building something better. No, I agreed. He doesn't get it. But that's okay. We're not doing this for him. As the sun set over the city, I walked through our flagship Haven and Light store, now expanded to include a showcase of the new Anderson Group aesthetic. The spaces complemented each other perfectly, both built on authenticity, quality, and genuine value. My father had asked me earlier when I would consider the transformation complete. The truth was, it would never be complete. Real success isn't a destination. It's a journey of constant improvement and adaptation. But standing there, surrounded by the fruits of my labor, both the little candle shop that had grown into an industry leader and the family business I'd helped save, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in showing them a better way forward. And sometimes the smallest lights cast the longest shadows. 1 year after taking control of the Anderson Group, I stood in the grand ballroom of our flagship hotel, watching as industry leaders and media gathered for a special announcement. The space had been transformed like everything else, featuring living walls, sustainable materials, and subtle lighting that made everything glow like candlelight. Haven and Light had just opened its 20th store, and the Anderson Group had successfully renovated all remaining properties to align with our sustainable luxury vision. Today, we would announce the merger of both companies under a new umbrella, Anderson and Haven International. Ready for this? Sarah asked, adjusting my blazer. She'd been my rock through everything, managing Haven and Light's explosive growth while I juggled the hotel transformation. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, touching the small vial of essential oils in my pocket, my own personal courage blend. My father approached, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. The press is waiting. And he hesitated. Marcus is here. I hadn't seen my brother since his disappearance to the Bahamas. He'd eventually returned when his money ran out, but he had kept his distance, watching from afar as I rebuilt what he'd nearly destroyed. Sure enough, there he was at the back of the room, looking uncomfortable in a suit that no longer fit quite right. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. Victoria Chen from Summit Partners took the podium first, outlining the financial success of our transformation. The Anderson Group's revenues had not only recovered but exceeded all projections. Haven and Light had tripled its market presence. Together, we created a new model for sustainable luxury that was revolutionizing both industries. When it was my turn to speak, I felt surprisingly calm. A year ago, many people thought luxury and sustainability couldn't coexist. That success had to come at the expense of ethics. Today, we've proven them wrong. Anderson and Haven International represents more than just a merger of two companies. It represents a new way forward. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause. As photographers snapped pictures, I noticed my mother wiping tears from her eyes. Even Marcus looked thoughtful. After the formal presentation, during the reception, Marcus approached me hesitantly. "Nice speech," he said, trying to sound casual. "Dad says you've done amazing things here." I studied my brother's face, seeing past the bravado to the uncertainty beneath. It wasn't about doing amazing things, Marcus. It was about doing things right. He shifted uncomfortably. "I've been thinking. Maybe I could learn, start from the bottom, really understand the business this time." I smiled, remembering my own journey. The gift shop at our Denver property needs an assistant manager. Long hours, lots of inventory work, customer service. Interested? He blinked, clearly expecting a more prestigious offer. But then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Yeah, actually, I think I am." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, I found myself in my office at Haven and Light, surrounded by the scents that had started it all. Sarah brought in 2 glasses of champagne. "Remember when this was just your little candle shop?" she asked, handing me a glass. I picked up our first candle mold, now preserved in a glass case. Seems like a lifetime ago. My father knocked on the door, joining us with his own champagne. "Your mother's organizing some kind of family dinner to celebrate. She's actually cooking herself. God help us all." I laughed, remembering the last time my mother had attempted to cook. "Tell her we'll be there. But first," I pulled out a small box from my desk. "I want you to have this." Inside was a custom-made candle, one I'd been working on for months. The label read Legacy, a complex blend of old and new, tradition and innovation. "I made this to remind us where we came from and where we're going," I explained as he opened it. "See the base notes? They're the same ones Mom used to love in her favorite perfume." His hands trembled slightly as he held the candle. "You remember that?" "I remember everything, Dad. The good and the bad. It all led us here." The next morning, I arrived early at the Anderson and Haven International headquarters, a renovated historic building that perfectly balanced preservation with innovation. The lobby featured a wall of photographs telling our story. Haven and Light's first store opening, the Anderson Group's transformation, and now our unified future. My team was already gathering for our first official merge operations meeting. Among them was Marcus, dressed for his first day of training in Denver. He said quietly as he passed my desk, "I finally get it. What you built here, it's not just about business. It's about legacy, a real one." I nodded, appreciating how much it must have cost his pride to admit that. "There's always room for growth, Marcus." That's what I learned in my little shop. The meeting was productive, filled with ideas for expanding our sustainable luxury model globally. But this time, the expansion would be careful, considered, built on solid foundations rather than quick profits. That evening, at my mother's celebration dinner, I watched my family interact with new lives. Marcus, humbled but perhaps finally growing up. My mother, who now proudly displayed Haven and Light candles throughout her house. My father, who had learned that true strength sometimes comes in unexpected packages. I have something to show you, my father said after dinner, leading me to his study. He opened his safe and pulled out a worn leather journal. This was your mother's business diary. I found it while cleaning out the old office. I took it carefully, recognizing my mom's handwriting. On the last page, dated just months before she passed away, was an entry about me. Olivia helped me with inventory today. She has a gift for seeing what others miss, for building beauty from simple things. I hope someday she'll understand that this makes her not less, but more. She knew, my father said softly. Even then, she knew what we couldn't see. I hugged the journal to my chest, feeling the pieces of my journey click into place. The little candle shop that everyone had dismissed had become the heart of something extraordinary. Not because it was big or flashy, but because it was built with integrity, patience, and love. Sarah texted me later, just got the latest numbers. Both divisions are exceeding Q4 projections. Your little shop isn't so little anymore. I smiled, remembering all the doubts, the dismissals, the condescension. Success, I'd learned, doesn't always look like what others expect. Sometimes it smells like hand-poured candles and feels like proving everyone wrong by doing everything right. The next morning, I walked through our flagship store before opening. Each candle told a story, of persistence, of growth, of transformation. But perhaps the most important story was the one that couldn't be seen. The story of a daughter who refused to let others define her worth. Anderson and Haven International would continue to grow, but we would grow right. Each step forward would be measured, each decision weighed against our values. The empire I'd built from a little candle shop would light the way, ready to start another day. Sarah asked, joining me at the door. I looked out at the morning sun hitting our storefront, then back at the empire we'd built, not just of business, but of vindication, of proof that success comes in many forms. Always ready, I replied, unlocking the door to whatever came next. Because sometimes the smallest lights cast the longest shadows, and sometimes the sweetest success is the kind that proves everyone wrong by being exactly right.